MTN Group released strong results last week and hiked its dividend significantly. However, it currently faces issues with its businesses in Iran and perhaps Nigeria. That's a big question right now. Let's get straight into it with a discussion on MTN. Owen, welcome to you. Let's get your views overall on the things to worry about with MTN right now.
Thank you, Samantha, for having me. MTN is a beautiful stock. I've loved the stock for forever. And I've said in the past, everywhere I comment, people ask me, what's your favorite stock? It's MTN. Big challenge with MTN, for example, these guys have got a cash pile of about 10 billion odd rands. And the one thing people don't realize about that cash pile is that most of it is sitting in Syria and Iran. And the guys just can't repatriate that money. So with all this strife going on right now in Syria and Iran, you know, you can imagine that's part of one of MTN's biggest challenges. You go to Nigeria, they just had this fuel hike. That's definitely going to cause a bit of strain to private consumers' buying ability. You know, they're not going to have enough disposable income to continue spending as much as they could on their communication. So I think that's partly some of the things that MTN has to worry about. And you know, there's a chance of increased competition as well in Nigeria. You know, with Glo coming through, but Airtel still going aggressive and trying to catch up with MTN's big market share. Yeah,
okay, so let's, before we get into Nigeria, let's focus in, Paul, on your views on the threats of Iran and Syria right now, because it's more perhaps about Iran because a majority of, or Iran's basically their third largest market, and around 15% of revenues. South Africa now is saying that they're looking for oil outside of Iran right now. What does this mean for MTN, who says they'll follow suit if South Africa says exit the market?
Yeah, look, it is a bit tricky because they operate in all of the countries that George Bush used to describe as part of the axis of evil. So, you know, Iran is a very tricky environment. It's a very big country. It's got 80 million people. And they managed to get in there after the Iranians basically kicked out Turkcell. Therein lies another story. Yeah. So it's grown very fast. They've committed lots of capital in there. There's a problem with the currency. Didn't really come up in the conversation around the recent results, but the Iranian rial has basically collapsed. So what they showed in the results, MTN, was how the business has been doing in terms of reals. But if you were to convert that to US dollars and back to rands, it wouldn't have been a very happy picture. But Owen is right. I mean, these are the nature of these markets. If you think about it, if you wanted to sell one product in a country like Nigeria, and we've all seen the pictures of what it looks like up there, and in Iran and so on, you'd want to sell something that was digitally delivered, which you got paid for in advance, which was highly valued by your customers, and which you didn't have to actually deliver. In other words, you know, you didn't have to do a fulfillment thing. Because
of the cost, basically, of doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy and so on, but I guess what we're implying is that there's a strong cash flow within Nigeria. There's a strong customer base in all these countries. The future really is about mobile connectivity. Everybody wants the product. So we kind of gloss over all of this stuff, and we notice that this is a company that's grown very strongly in terms of customers and all that. So it's got its value, and people are not that anxious and negative. It's making northwards of 10 Rand a share. It's kind of come of age. It's a very big company now, 270 billion market cap company. I love it as well. I also think it's a fantastic story.
Well, we haven't even got to hot or not yet. You can't
dwell on all that crazy stuff about those countries too much. Otherwise, you'd never buy them.
Okay, so you're talking about cash repatriation in terms of the short-term threat right now, the short-term issues that the company is facing. Yeah. Even that being said, do you think there's still a strong case for it being in these countries?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, MTN, there isn't many acquisition targets out there left for MTN to take out, you know, for the size of business it wants to get to. So I think they have to do their best to make sure they defend their positions in those jurisdictions, Syria and Iran, and in Nigeria. I mean, I think the management at MTN must have been relieved when things got resolved in Nigeria, because remember, 50% of MTN's earnings come from Nigeria. That's a big deal. So I think it's in their best interest, and hopefully luck is on their side, and Iran and Syria don't melt down to an environment where they can't repatriate any of their cash.
So let's focus in on opportunities in Nigeria right now, because as you say, that's their key market in terms of earnings growth. If you look at Nigeria's GDP numbers, which came through yesterday, telecom sector growing rapidly there. Nigeria's got a 50% market share. It has been eroded. You mentioned those competitors. Are they posing a real risk to MTN right now, or is it managing to step up to the game, spending enough money in Nigeria and managing to ward off the threat of these competitors?
Management actually indicates that you know, they've managed to hold on to some of their market share in Nigeria. Guys like Glo and Bharti Airtel, they went out and spent quite a lot of cash on trying to be more aggressive with pricing, and they got into all these promotional products that we need to try and gain market share away from MTN. But as we understand from management in a recent discussion, that hasn't managed to really nick away some of MTN's big market share gains. The challenge with MTN though remains the threat of continued aggressive price wars coming from these guys that could force them to reduce their charges as well to their markets. Margins already are starting to get challenged in Nigeria, and I think that's a bit of an issue going forward. However, MTN is nicely positioned in top tier market spaces, in segments rather, in Nigeria, and I think they'll protect that in the next coming couple of years, hopefully.
Paul, what about the dividend? Because that excited investors when MTN released its results, and many are expecting them to continue rewarding investors nicely as they reduce their capex as well.
Because it used to be a story of, you know, growth, buying businesses, you know, needing to preserve capital, not a big dividend payer. But it really did shift in that respect. So I think that's attracted a whole new class of investors that are happy with the yield. And I think that's also part of the management shift with Sifiso Debengwa now having taken over. They're not looking at a big, you know, overreaching transaction in India, which looked as though that was Phuthuma Nhleka's plan before. So I think there's a lot to like. I think the other thing that really does, though, need to be put on the table is that if you look at the mobile industry globally, it's moving towards greater and greater use of smartphones. And what happens when people get smartphones is there's access to data use goes up a lot. So I think the future of the business in part is in transitioning these big young customer bases that they have in these countries like in Iran and Nigeria, where there's no fixed line alternative. So there's no question of like getting to your office and plugging into your ADSL line. This is as good as it gets. So if they can take the network advantage that they've got in terms of sites, including sites that are powered through their own little mini power stations, convert those to 4G LTE base stations, there's a massive additional business coming in terms of people's ability to use smartphones to do all the things that we know you can do, social media, buying, shopping, all that stuff.
Okay, so we've got to that time of the show with MTN, hot or not?
Now look, MTN has pushed up nicely through 140 all the way to 145, but I think if I can get the stock at 138, then it's hot. It's got a nice dividend of north of $4 coming through in the next week odd. So I think, you know, it's neither here nor there really. At these levels, I don't think it's attractive for me for a short-term trade. But for the long term, if the environment in Syria and Iran is great, then we would get involved. But right now, for the short term, I don't think it's hot.
But you're waiting for 138, 142, around there, 141. Are you also looking for the dip, or do you think it's still value to be buying right now?
Yeah, we're more inclined to be accumulating them when people have got funds to invest. So we're happy with the current price. Look, it went to 145. It took a little bit of a swoon. I think the Iranian thing is massively overhyped in the media. So I think if you are looking for a tactical buy, you could buy them on the basis that that thing's going to soften up and dissipate. Although the valuation issues are always tricky, given all of this noise, it's not exceptionally expensive at around a 13 price to earnings ratio, but then, you know, that's always what people grapple with these big, fast-growing big caps is what's the appropriate price. I think it's fine to buy them at this level.
Fine. Does that mean hot or not?
Hot, definitely hot.
Hot and lukewarm, waiting for the dip.
Yeah, look, so it's a challenge really for, I mean, you're really praying that Syria and Iran don't really get out of control. You know, the sanctions from the US, I think they kick in about 2 to 3 months time. So we want to see how that pans out, because if that goes ugly, all of that money locked away is going to be locked away probably for the next 3 years at most. These guys are not going to be able to access it. Yep, and you will see foreign sellers come and give the stock if anything goes wrong in Iran and Syria.